Daewon Kim stood at the massive window of the transport ship and stared at the Galactic Academy. The space station was enormous, bigger than anything he had ever seen. It floated in space near a neutron star, and the star's light made the station shine like a diamond. Daewon had traveled for 6 months to reach this place. 6 months of sleeping in a tiny cabin, eating recycled food, and dreaming about what waited for him. He was the first human ever accepted into the Galactic Academy. The first one from Earth to study alongside aliens from 200 different worlds. The responsibility felt heavy on his shoulders, but Daewon had never been one to back down from a challenge. That was probably why Earth had chosen him. The transport ship docked with a soft thump. Daewon picked up his single bag and walked toward the exit. As the door opened, he took his first breath of Academy air. It smelled clean, maybe too clean. Everything looked spotless and perfect. The walls were a soft white color, and lights glowed gently from the ceiling. Signs in multiple languages floated in the air, pointing toward different sections. A tall alien waited near the entrance. The creature looked like it was made of blue crystal, and light seemed to pass through its body. Daewon recognized the species from his studies. This was a Korthax, one of the oldest and wisest species in the galaxy. "Welcome, human Daewon," the Korthax said. Its voice sounded like wind chimes. "I am Instructor Velmora. I will guide you through orientation." "Thank you," Daewon said. He extended his hand for a handshake, but the instructor did not move. After an awkward moment, Daewon lowered his hand. "Physical contact between species is discouraged," Velmora explained. "For safety reasons. Safety." Daewon would hear that word many times in the coming days. The orientation took place in a large hall filled with new students. Daewon saw creatures of every shape and size. Some had tentacles, others had wings. Some floated in special suits filled with liquid, while others wore breathing masks. Everyone stared at him when he walked in. He was used to being stared at by now. Humans were rare in the galaxy, and many aliens found them frightening. Velmora began the orientation by explaining the Academy's rules. There were many rules. Students must walk slowly in the corridors. Students must follow strict schedules for eating and sleeping. Students must never enter restricted zones. Students must report any unusual feelings or thoughts to counselors immediately. Students must complete safety drills 3 times per week. Daewon listened carefully, but something felt wrong. The academy seemed more like a hospital than a school. Everything was designed to keep students safe, but also to keep them from taking any risks. "Now," Velmora said, "we will have a discussion period. New students, please share something about your home worlds and your interests." Several students spoke. A Velthir talked about the safe underground cities of its planet. A Crithian described the peaceful oceans of its world. Everyone emphasized how careful and cautious their people were. Then it was Daewon's turn. He stood up and smiled. "I'm from Earth," he said. "My planet is very different from what I've heard here. On Earth, we have people who jump out of aircraft for fun. We call it skydiving. Others dive deep into the ocean where the pressure can crush you. Some people climb the tallest mountains where the air is thin and the cold can kill you in minutes." The room became very quiet. Every alien was staring at him now, but not with curiosity. They looked shocked, even horrified. "We explore caves deep underground," Daewon continued. "We sail across oceans in small boats. We've even left our planet and walked on our moon. Long before we had perfect safety equipment, humans like to explore. We like to see what's beyond the next hill, even if it might be dangerous." An alien in the front row made a gasping sound. Another student got up and quickly left the room. Velmora's crystalline body seemed to darken slightly. "Human Daewon," Velmora said slowly. "Your species engages in these activities voluntarily? For recreation?" "Yes," Daewon said. "Is that unusual?" "It is highly unusual," Velmora replied. "Most species consider such activities to be symptoms of mental illness. We will need to schedule several counseling sessions for you." Daewon wanted to laugh, but he could see that everyone was serious. These aliens really thought humans were crazy. After orientation, Velmora took Daewon to his living quarters. The room was small but comfortable, with 2 sleeping pods and a shared workspace. Inside, a creature that looked like a large insect was arranging its belongings. The creature had 6 legs, 2 arms, and a hard shell that gleamed in the light. "This is Jiwoo Park," Velmora said. "He is a Velthir. He will be your roommate." Jiwoo turned around and saw Daewon. The Velthir's eyes went wide with fear. He backed away until he hit the wall. "Hello." Daewon said gently. He kept his distance, remembering the rule about physical contact. Nice to meet you. Jiwoo made a clicking sound. His translator device turned it into words. You are a predator, he said. His voice was shaking. Your eyes face forward. You have sharp teeth. Your species hunted and killed for food. Well, yes, Daewon admitted. But we also eat plants. And we don't hunt anymore, not for survival. We have farms and grocery stores. But you could hunt, Jiwoo said. If you wanted to. You have the instincts. Daewon did not know what to say to that. He sat down on his sleeping pod and tried to look as non-threatening as possible. I promise I won't hurt you, he said. I'm here to learn, just like you. Jiwoo did not look convinced, but he nodded slowly. Velmora left them alone, and an awkward silence filled the room. Over the next few days, Daewon tried to settle into academy life. He attended classes on xenobiology, quantum navigation, and first contact protocols. The classes were interesting, but the teaching style frustrated him. Every lesson focused on avoiding risks, following procedures, and never deviating from established methods. When a teacher asked what they would do if they discovered a sealed alien structure, every student said the same thing. They would wait. They would call for experts. They would run tests for months or years before even thinking about opening it. When the teacher asked Daewon, he suggested using sensors to check for dangers, then carefully opening it if it seemed safe. The class reacted as if he had suggested setting the structure on fire. The teacher sent him to talk to a counselor. One evening, Daewon was studying in the common area when he overheard other students talking. They were discussing the Abyss Trial, a famous survival course at the academy. The trial was considered the most difficult test a student could take. Many students spent years working up the courage to attempt it. I heard 3 students died in the past century, one alien said. Even with all the safety measures. The dropout rate is 40%, another added. Most students activate their emergency beacons within the first day. Daewon looked up from his studies. What exactly is this trial? He asked. The students explained that the Abyss Trial simulated survival on a hostile planet. Students had to survive for 7 days and travel 50 kilometers to an extraction point. The environment included extreme weather, dangerous animals, and limited resources. It sounds challenging, Daewon said. Where do I sign up? The students looked at him like he had grown a second head. You just arrived, one said. Nobody takes the trial in their first year. You need to prepare mentally and physically. I've done survival training on Earth, Daewon said. I think I'm ready. Word spread quickly. Within a day, everyone knew that the human wanted to attempt the Abyss Trial. Many thought he was suicidal. Others thought he simply did not understand how dangerous it was. Velmora called Daewon to her office. The crystalline instructor looked more solid than usual, which Daewon had learned meant she was worried. Human Daewon, Velmora said. I must advise you against this course of action. The Abyss Trial is too dangerous, especially for someone so new to the academy. Daewon looked at the instructor calmly. He asked the question that would change everything. For who? Velmora paused. The question seemed to confuse her. I do not understand, she said. You said it's too dangerous, Daewon explained. But dangerous for who? For a Velthir who evolved in safe underground tunnels? For a Crithian who lives in calm oceans? Maybe it's too dangerous for them. But I'm human. I'm from a planet where danger is normal, where survival means taking risks. The instructor was silent for a long moment. Finally, she spoke. You're saying that danger is relative, that what terrifies one species might not terrify another. Exactly, Daewon said. So I'll ask again. Is this trial too dangerous for me? Or is it too dangerous for everyone else? Velmora's body flickered with colors Daewon had never seen before. He wondered if it meant she was thinking hard about his question. Very well, the instructor said finally. I will approve your registration for the Abyss Trial. But you must complete the standard preparation program first. And Human Daewon, yes? I hope your confidence is justified. Because if it is not, you will learn very quickly what true danger feels like. Daewon smiled. I'm looking forward to it. The preparation program for the Abyss Trial started the next morning. Daewon arrived at the training center early, expecting physical exercises and survival drills. Instead, he found himself in a small, quiet room with soft lighting and comfortable chairs. A counselor sat across from him, an alien that looked like a floating jellyfish with glowing tentacles. "Welcome, human Day One," the counselor said in a soothing voice. "I am Counselor Mira. We will begin with fear conditioning exercises. Please relax and clear your mind." For the next 3 hours, Day One sat through meditation sessions, breathing exercises, and mental visualization techniques. The counselor guided him through imaginary scenarios, teaching him how to recognize fear and manage it. Every other student treated these sessions like sacred rituals, closing their eyes and concentrating deeply. Day One tried to take it seriously, but he kept thinking about his training on Earth. The special forces had thrown him into freezing water, made him navigate through dark tunnels, and forced him to stay awake for days. That was fear conditioning. This felt like a relaxation spa. "You seem distracted," Counselor Mira observed. "Are you feeling anxious about the trial?" "No," Day One said honestly. "I'm feeling pretty calm, actually." The counselor's tentacles flickered with concern. "That is unusual. Most candidates experience significant anxiety at this stage. Perhaps you are suppressing your emotions. We should schedule additional sessions," Day One sighed. He was beginning to understand that the galaxy measured everything by their own standards. What seemed normal to him looked strange to them. What terrified them barely bothered him. After the counseling session, Day One joined a study group in the library. Jiwoo was there along with a Krithian named Hyojin. The Krithian wore a water-filled suit that allowed her to breathe. She was one of the top students at the academy, known for her careful planning and attention to detail. They were studying a case from xenoarchaeology class. The scenario described an ancient sealed structure on an abandoned planet. The question asked what steps they would take to investigate it. "First, we establish a safe perimeter," Hyojin said. "Then we scan the structure for 6 months to map its interior. Then we submit our findings to the Archaeological Council and wait for their analysis. That could take 2 years. Only after receiving approval would we consider entering." "That seems like a long time," Day One said. "Safety requires patience," Hyojin replied. "What would you do?" Day One thought about it. "I would scan the structure for a week to check for obvious dangers like radiation or unstable foundations. If it looks reasonably safe, I would send in a small drone first. If the drone comes back fine, I would enter with proper safety gear and explore." Jiwoo's translator made a sound like a gasp. "That is incredibly reckless. What if the drone misses something? What if the structure collapses?" "Then I wear protective gear and bring proper support equipment," Day One said. "Look, I understand being careful, but if we wait years for every decision, we will never discover anything new. Humans explored dangerous places on Earth without knowing what was inside. That is how we learned and grew." Hyojin's suit bubbled, which Day One had learned meant she was agitated. "Your species did not wait for ethical approval before exploring?" "We did not have anyone to give us approval," Day One said. "We were alone on our planet. We had to figure things out ourselves." This seemed to shock both aliens. They had grown up in a galaxy where every species followed the same careful procedures. The idea of a species developing without guidance was foreign to them. The study session ended awkwardly. As Day One left the library, he noticed other students staring and whispering. His reputation was growing, and not in a good way. Some students thought he was brave. Most thought he was dangerous. 2 weeks into the preparation program, something happened that changed how everyone saw him. The academy held regular training simulations in large virtual reality chambers. Students would put on special helmets and enter simulated environments to practice their skills. The simulations were considered perfectly safe because they were not real. On this particular day, 12 students were running a fire evacuation simulation. They were practicing how to exit a burning building in an organized manner. Everything was going according to procedure. The students were walking slowly toward the exits, calling out their positions and following the safety guidelines. Then something went wrong with the computer system. The safety protocols failed. The simulation became too real. The virtual fire began generating actual heat. The virtual smoke started affecting their breathing. The exit doors, which should have remained accessible, locked shut. Day One was not in the simulation, but he was in the observation room with several instructors. He watched as the students began to panic. They were trapped in a room that was getting hotter and harder to breathe in. The students started calling for help, but their voices were getting weaker. The instructors were frantically trying to shut down the simulation, but nothing worked. The computer had frozen. They called for technical support, but help would take at least 10 minutes to arrive. "We need to get them out now," Daewon said. "We are trying," an instructor said, "but we cannot override the system without proper authorization codes." "Then we open the chamber manually," Daewon said. He did not wait for permission. He ran to the simulation chamber door and found the emergency release panel. It was locked behind a glass cover with a warning label. The label said that manual override should only be used by authorized personnel. Daewon broke the glass with his elbow and pulled the emergency lever. Alarms started screaming. The chamber door hissed open. Smoke poured out, and 12 students stumbled into the corridor, coughing and gasping. "Get them to medical," Daewon ordered. Some instructors rushed to help the students. Others stared at Daewon with expressions he could not read. Everyone survived. They were shaken but unhurt. Daewon expected gratitude. Instead, he received a formal reprimand. He had to meet with a disciplinary committee. The committee consisted of 3 senior instructors. They sat behind a long table and looked at Daewon with serious expressions. "Human Daewon," one of them said, "you tampered with emergency equipment without authorization. This is a serious violation of Academy regulations." "People were in danger," Daewon said. "I saved them." "You took action without consulting proper authorities," another instructor said. "What if you had made the situation worse? What if your unauthorized intervention had caused injuries?" "But it did not," Daewon said, trying to keep his voice calm. "I assessed the situation, made a decision, and acted. That is what you do in an emergency." "That is what humans do in emergencies," the third instructor corrected. "Most species call for help and wait for properly trained personnel." Daewon realized that this was a fundamental difference. The galaxy had systems and procedures for everything. When something went wrong, you followed the procedures and waited for help. Taking independent action was seen as reckless, even if it worked. "I'm sorry for breaking your rules," Daewon said carefully, "but I am not sorry for saving those students. If the same situation happened again, I would do the same thing." The committee was silent for a moment. Finally, they issued their decision. Daewon would receive a formal warning in his record. He would also be required to attend additional training sessions on proper emergency procedures. As Daewon left the hearing, he felt frustrated. He had done the right thing, he was sure of it. But in this place, doing the right thing meant following rules, not making quick decisions. The incident made him famous across the academy. Students started seeking him out, asking questions about Earth and human behavior. Some were curious. Others were concerned. A few even seemed inspired. Jiwoo had stopped being afraid of him. The Velther now watched Daewon with something like admiration. "You did not hesitate," Jiwoo said one evening in their room. "When those students were in danger, you just acted. How do you do that?" "I do not know," Daewon said honestly. "I saw a problem and I knew how to fix it. So I fixed it." "Is that unusual?" "Very unusual," Jiwoo said. "Most of us would freeze. We would worry about making mistakes or breaking rules. You just act." Meanwhile, Ambassador Bora Choi was having a difficult time. She was Earth's representative to the Galactic Council, and her job was to make sure humans had good relationships with alien species. Daewon was making her job very hard. She received daily complaints from worried aliens. Some wanted humans banned from the academy. Others wanted stricter monitoring of human students. Everyone seemed to think that humans were too unpredictable and dangerous. Bora had to attend countless meetings to explain human psychology and behavior. She defended Daewon publicly, while privately wishing he would be a little less dramatic. But she also felt secretly proud. Daewon was showing the galaxy what humans could do. As the preparation program continued, Daewon began to understand the challenge ahead. The Abyss trial was not just about surviving in a dangerous environment. It was about facing the psychological pressure of being completely alone and unsupported. It was about pushing past the point where your mind tells you to quit. For most species, that breaking point came quickly. They were not used to being uncomfortable or afraid. When the trial got hard, they hit their emergency beacons and escaped. Daewon wondered where his breaking point was. He had been uncomfortable and afraid many times on Earth. He had learned to push through it. But would that be enough? The night before the trial began, Daewon could not sleep. He lay in his pod and thought about everything that had led him here. His training on Earth, the long journey through space, the strange and wonderful academy where danger was treated like a disease. Tomorrow he would enter the Abyss trial. He would face whatever challenges it presented. and he would show the galaxy what a human could do. He smiled in the darkness. He was ready. The morning of the trial arrived with artificial dawn lighting in the academy corridors. Daewon woke early and packed his basic survival kit. The rules allowed only minimal equipment: a water container, a basic knife, a fire starter, some rope, and an emergency beacon. Nothing else. 16 candidates gathered at the entrance to the massive simulation chamber. Daewon recognized a few faces from his classes. They all looked nervous. Some were breathing heavily. Others had their eyes closed, probably doing the meditation exercises from their training. Instructor Velmora stood before them, her crystalline body glowing in the light. "Today you enter the abyss," she said. "You will face 7 days in one of the most hostile environments we can simulate. Your goal is simple. Survive and reach the extraction point 50 kilometers from your starting position." She paused and looked at each candidate. "Remember your training, stay calm. Think carefully before acting, and if you feel overwhelmed, use your emergency beacon. There is no shame in survival." Her eyes stopped on Daewon for a moment longer than the others. He gave her a small nod. She flickered with colors he still did not understand. The chamber doors opened. Beyond them was a different world. Dark sky, rocky terrain, and the sound of distant thunder. The candidates entered one by one, each disappearing into the simulated wilderness. When Daewon stepped through, the temperature hit him first. It was cold, much colder than the controlled academy environment. The air smelled like rain and earth. Above him, strange clouds moved fast across an alien sky. 2 moons hung low on the horizon. The other candidates had already scattered, each seeking shelter and safety. That was the standard strategy: find a secure location, stay hidden, conserve energy, and move only when necessary. Daewon had a different plan. He needed information. He could not make good decisions without understanding his environment. So instead of hiding, he started exploring. He climbed to higher ground and surveyed the landscape. He saw forests in one direction, a river in another, mountains to the north, and what looked like caves to the east. He made mental notes of everything, then he started moving. He checked the plants to see which ones might be edible. He tasted the water in the river and found it clean. He watched the behavior of small animals to understand what they feared. Every piece of information was a tool he could use later. By the end of the first day, Daewon had covered more ground than any other candidate. He had mapped safe routes, identified food sources, and located potential shelter locations. He had also spotted some of the predators that inhabited this world, large creatures with claws and teeth, but nothing worse than what existed on Earth. In the control center, instructors watched with fascination. Every candidate was being monitored through tiny drones that followed them. Most candidates had found hiding spots and were settling in for a long, careful journey. The human was running around like he was on a nature hike. "He is going to exhaust himself," one instructor predicted. "Moving that much on the first day is wasteful." "He will regret it." Velmora said nothing. She was beginning to understand that human logic was different. Day 2 brought rain. Hard, cold rain that soaked through clothing and made the ground slippery. Most candidates stayed in their shelters and waited for it to pass. Daewon kept moving. The rain would hide his scent from predators and mask the sound of his footsteps. It was an advantage, not a problem. He made good progress that day, covering nearly 15 kilometers. He was already a third of the way to the extraction point. On day 3, the simulation system activated a major environmental challenge. A massive storm began to form, weather conditions that would make travel impossible and test the limits of any shelter. This was the moment designed to break weak candidates. The other candidates saw the dark clouds gathering and immediately sought the best shelter they could find. 5 of them, overwhelmed by fear, hit their emergency beacons and were extracted within the first hour of the storm. Daewon saw the storm differently. Every predator and dangerous animal would be hiding. The terrain would be treacherous but empty of threats. If he could handle the weather, he could make huge progress while everyone else was paralyzed by fear. He wrapped himself in the waterproof material he had made from plant fibers. He kept his head down and pushed forward. The wind screamed around him. Rain hit like needles. Lightning crashed close enough to feel the electricity in the air. It was miserable. It was exhausting. It was exactly the kind of challenge Daewon had trained for his entire life. He traveled another 10 kilometers during the storm. By the time it passed, he was more than halfway to his goal. In the control center, the instructors were silent. They had never seen anyone move through that storm. The simulation was designed to force candidates to shelter and wait. This human had treated it like an opportunity. Remarkable, one instructor whispered, and slightly terrifying. Day 4 brought a new challenge, but not from the simulation. Day 1 was crossing a rocky ravine when he heard a sound, a cry for help coming from below. He looked down and saw another candidate trapped on a ledge about 20 meters down. The candidate was a young Velthier, and he looked injured. Day 1 checked his equipment. He had rope, but not much. The climb would be dangerous. And the rules of the trial were clear. This was an individual test. Helping another candidate was not required, and it was definitely not encouraged. The smart thing to do was keep walking. The injured candidate had an emergency beacon. He could extract himself if things got worse. Helping him could risk both their lives and would definitely slow Day 1 down. Day 1 started climbing down. In the control center, alarms started sounding. "The human is breaking protocol," an instructor said. "He is attempting a rescue. This is forbidden. Do we stop him?" another asked. Belmora thought for a long moment. "No," she said finally. "Let us see what he does." Day 1 reached the injured Velthier. His name was Taeyang, and he had fallen during the storm. His leg was broken, and he was in considerable pain. "Why are you helping me?" Taeyang asked through his translator. "The rules say you should leave me." "The rules say a lot of things," Day 1 replied. He examined the injury and used his rope to make a splint. "Can you move?" "Not well," Taeyang admitted. "I should use my beacon." "If you want to quit, quit," Day 1 said. "But if you want to finish this trial, I will help you. Your choice." Taeyang looked at the human for a long moment. This strange creature from the dangerous world was offering to carry him 50 kilometers through hostile terrain. It was illogical. It was against the rules. It was also the bravest thing anyone had ever offered to do for him. "I want to finish," Taeyang said. Daiwan nodded. He fashioned a makeshift stretcher from branches and his remaining rope. It was crude but functional. He helped Taeyang onto it and began the slow work of getting them both out of the ravine. For the next 3 days, Daiwan traveled with the injured Velthier. It was slow and difficult. The stretcher was heavy. Taeyang tried to help by crawling when possible, but his injury limited his movement. Daiwan adapted. He set traps to catch food so he did not have to hunt. He built more efficient shelters that took less time to construct. He found shortcuts through dangerous terrain that other candidates would never risk. At night they talked. Taeyang asked questions about Earth and humans. Day 1 told him stories about climbing mountains, diving in oceans, and exploring caves, things that seemed normal to him but impossible to the Velthier. "How do you do it?" Taeyang asked on the 6th night. "How do you face fear and keep moving?" "Fear is just information," Day 1 said. "It tells you that something is dangerous. But dangerous is not the same as impossible. You feel the fear, understand it, and then decide if the risk is worth taking." "But what if you make the wrong decision?" Taeyang asked. "Then you learn from it," Day 1 said. "That is how you grow." Every human who ever explored or discovered something new made wrong decisions along the way. The difference is they did not let that stop them from trying. Taeyang thought about this. His species had avoided wrong decisions by simply avoiding decisions altogether. They waited for consensus, for approval, for perfect information. Maybe that was why they had stopped exploring. On the morning of the 7th day, they faced their final challenge. The extraction point was visible in the distance, but between them and safety was one of the apex predators of this world. A massive creature with armored hide, powerful jaws, and aggressive territorial behavior. Most candidates never encountered this predator because they moved too slowly and carefully. It patrolled the outer zones, which meant fast-moving prey would cross its path. The simulation designers had included it as a final test for any candidate brave or foolish enough to rush toward the goal. Day 1 studied the creature from behind cover. He could not fight it directly. He was exhausted from days of travel, and he was protecting an injured companion. He needed a different approach. He noticed that the creature was guarding a specific area, probably its nest. It was not hunting them specifically. It just did not want them to pass through its territory. Day 1 gathered large rocks and began throwing them to the side, away from their path. The creature turned and charged toward the noise. While it was distracted, Day 1 pulled the stretcher and ran. They did not stop until they were well past the territorial boundary. The extraction point was just ahead. Day One could see the beacon glowing in the afternoon light. They had made it. They crossed the final 100 meters together. As they entered the extraction zone, the simulation ended. The hostile world faded away, replaced by the clean white walls of the Academy chamber. Medical teams rushed forward to help Taeyang. Instructors approached Day One with expressions he could not read. He had completed the trial. But he had also broken the most fundamental rule. Instructor Velmora stood before him. Her crystalline body was glowing with many colors. "Human Day One," she said slowly, "you have given us much to think about." Behind her, Day One could see the scoreboard. Of the 16 candidates who entered, only 7 had completed the trial. He was one of them. And he was the only one who had helped someone else. "I know I broke the rules," Day One said, "but I would do it again." "Yes," Velmora said. "We know you would. That is precisely what concerns us and impresses us. Now come. We have many questions." Day One followed the instructor, wondering what would happen next. He had finished the trial, but he suspected his real test was just beginning. The tribunal convened 3 days after the Abyss trial ended. Day One stood in a large chamber before a panel of 7 senior instructors. The room was filled with observers, students, faculty members, and even some diplomats from various species. Everyone wanted to see what would happen to the human who had broken the sacred rules of the trial. The lead instructor, a massive creature covered in scales, spoke first. "Human Day One, you are here because you violated the fundamental rules of the Abyss trial. This trial tests individual capability. You helped another candidate. This is forbidden." "I understand," Day One said calmly. "Do you understand why the rule exists?" another instructor asked. "To test each person individually," Day One replied. "To see how they handle being alone and unsupported." "Exactly," the instructor said. "So why did you break this rule? You knew it existed. You chose to ignore it." Day One took a breath. "Because another rule seemed more important to me. The rule that says we help people in danger when we can. I know that was not part of this test. But on Earth we value helping others above following procedures." The chamber erupted in discussion. Some instructors looked angry. Others seemed thoughtful. The audience whispered among themselves. Instructor Velmora, who had been silent until now, finally spoke. Her crystalline body glowed brightly. "I have a question for my colleagues. What is the purpose of the Abyss trial?" The lead instructor seemed surprised. "To test survival skills and mental resilience, obviously." "Yes," Velmora said. "But why do we test these qualities? What do we hope to find?" Another instructor answered. "We seek individuals who can handle dangerous situations, who can think clearly under pressure and make good decisions." "Then perhaps," Velmora said slowly, "we should consider whether this human demonstrated exactly those qualities. He assessed a dangerous situation. He made a decision to help despite the personal cost. He successfully protected an injured individual while completing his own objective. Is that not the essence of what we claim to teach?" The chamber fell silent. The lead instructor looked uncomfortable. "You are suggesting we ignore his rule violation?" "I am suggesting," Velmora said, "that we have confused following rules with doing what is right. This human has shown us the difference." The tribunal debated for hours. Day One was sent outside to wait. He sat on a bench in the corridor, wondering if he would be expelled from the academy. Taeyang limped over on his healing leg and sat beside him. "Thank you," the young Velthir said, "for what you did." "You are welcome," Day One replied. "How is your leg?" "Healing well," Taeyang said. "But that is not important. What you taught me is important. You showed me that rules are not the same as wisdom. That sometimes courage means doing what is right, not what is permitted." Day One smiled. "You learned that from a broken leg and a long walk?" "I learned it from watching you," Taeyang said. "You never hesitated. You saw what needed to be done and you did it. My whole life I have been taught to hesitate, to wait, to seek permission. You have shown me another way." Before Day One could respond, the chamber doors opened. The tribunal had reached a decision. The lead instructor looked grave. "Human Day One, we have made our decision. Your actions during the Abyss trial were unprecedented. They violated established protocols. However, they also demonstrated exceptional judgment, courage, and skill." Day One waited. "Therefore," the instructor continued, "we have decided to both reprimand and commend you. You will receive a formal warning for rule violation. You will also receive a commendation for exceptional performance. Your actions will be studied as a case example in our revised curriculum. The audience reacted with shock. A reprimand and a commendation? Such a thing had never happened before. It made no logical sense, but Daewon understood. The Academy was trying to process something new. They were being forced to reconsider their assumptions about danger, rules, and courage. It was uncomfortable for them. It would take time. News of the tribunal decision spread across the galaxy within hours. Humans were no longer just a curiosity. They were now a subject of serious debate. Some species called for stricter controls on human activities. Others began to question their own approach to risk and safety. Ambassador Bora found herself giving the same speech over and over. Humans are not reckless, she would explain patiently. We simply have a different relationship with risk. Our planet taught us that growth requires discomfort. That discovery requires courage. That survival sometimes means breaking rules. Some diplomats listened thoughtfully. Others demanded that Earth recall its students. Bora defended Daewon publicly while privately sending him messages that said things like, "Please try not to start any more interstellar incidents this week." Daewon himself became something of a celebrity at the Academy. Some students avoided him, afraid of his unpredictable human nature, but others sought him out, asking questions about Earth and human culture. They wanted to understand how a species could be so comfortable with danger. One evening, Hyojin approached him in the library. The Crithian had barely spoken to him since the trial ended. Her water-filled suit bubbled as she settled into a chair across from him. "I owe you an apology," she said. "I thought you were reckless. I thought you would fail the trial and prove that human methods were foolish." "And now?" Daewon asked. "Now I think perhaps my species has been too careful for too long," Hyojin admitted. "We have avoided danger so completely that we have also avoided growth. We have forgotten how to take risks." "There is wisdom in caution," Daewon said. "Your species has survived for millions of years." "That is impressive." "Survived, yes," Hyojin said. "But have we truly lived? When was the last time a Crithian explored something unknown? When did we last take a chance on something uncertain? We exist, but we do not adventure." Daewon understood what she was feeling. The galaxy had optimized for safety so completely that they had lost something essential: the desire to explore, the willingness to risk failure for the chance of discovery. "It is not too late to change," Daewon said. "If that is what you want." Hyojin's suit bubbled more actively. "Perhaps I will attempt the Abyss trial next year. With your training methods, if you are willing to teach me." Daewon smiled. "I would be honored." Over the following weeks, subtle changes began appearing throughout the Academy. Some instructors started incorporating human training concepts into their lessons, not replacing the careful procedures, but supplementing them with discussions about adaptive thinking and calculated risk. Ji-woo, who had started as Daewon's terrified roommate, became one of his closest friends. The Velthir still flinched at sudden movements, but he no longer feared the human. Instead, he studied Daewon's behavior, trying to understand how someone could be so calm in the face of uncertainty. "You make it look easy," Ji-woo said one night. "But it cannot be easy. You must feel fear like everyone else." "Of course I feel fear," Daewon said. "Fear is natural. It is what you do with the fear that matters." "How do I learn that?" Ji-woo asked. "Start small," Daewon suggested. "Tomorrow take a different route to class. Try food you have never eaten. Ask a question you are afraid to ask. Each small brave action makes the next one easier." Ji-woo considered this. "That is all? Just small actions?" "That is how it starts," Daewon said. "Courage is not something you are born with. It is something you build, one small decision at a time." The next day, Ji-woo took a different route to class. It was a tiny thing, meaningless in the grand scheme of the universe. But for a Velthir who had lived his entire life following the same safe patterns, it was a revolution. Instructor Velmora called Daewon to her office one afternoon. He expected another lecture about following rules. Instead, she asked him a simple question. "What do you want from your time at this academy?" she asked. Daewon thought carefully. "I want to learn everything I can about the galaxy. I want to understand different species and cultures. I want to explore places no human has ever seen. And I want to show the galaxy that humans can contribute something valuable." Velmora's body flickered with colors. "You have already shown us something valuable. You have reminded us that safety and stagnation are not the same thing. That rules should serve wisdom, not replace it. This is a lesson the galaxy needed. So I am not in trouble? Daewon asked with a slight smile. You are always in some degree of trouble, Velmora said, and Daewon thought he detected humor in her tone. But perhaps that is not entirely a bad thing. As Daewon left the instructor's office, he felt hopeful. The galaxy was starting to understand. Change was happening slowly but surely. He had asked a simple question. For who is this too dangerous? And that question had started something important. He did not know it yet, but his greatest challenge was still ahead. A challenge that would test everything he had learned. A challenge that would prove whether his methods could work in the real world, not just in controlled simulations. That challenge was coming soon. 6 months passed. Daewon settled into academy life, though his classes continued to be interesting in unexpected ways. He was no longer the strange new human. Now he was the human who had changed how the academy thought about risk and courage. Then the emergency came. It started with a routine research mission. A ship carrying 30 students and faculty members had traveled to an unexplored planet to study ancient ruins. The mission was supposed to be safe, carefully planned according to all academy protocols. But something went wrong. The ship crashed during landing. Survivors were stranded on a planet with a toxic atmosphere, aggressive wildlife, and unstable geology. They sent a distress signal before their communications failed. The Academy immediately assembled their crisis response team. Experts analyzed the situation. They ran simulations. They debated rescue options. After 6 hours of careful discussion, they reached a conclusion. The rescue was too dangerous. The planet was too hostile. Any rescue mission would likely result in more casualties. The official rescue fleet would arrive in 72 hours, but analysis showed the survivors probably would not last that long. The authorities began preparing memorial statements. Daewon heard about the crisis while studying in the library. He pulled up the mission data on his terminal and read everything available. Environmental conditions, terrain analysis, estimated survival time for the crew, lists of the missing students and faculty. He saw names he recognized. A Velthir student from his xenobiology class, a Crithian instructor who had helped him with quantum navigation, people he knew, people who were going to die because the rescue was considered too dangerous. He stood up and walked to the Crisis Command Center. Guards tried to stop him at the entrance, but he pushed past them. Inside, the senior administrators were discussing funeral arrangements. I have a plan, Daewon announced. Everyone turned to stare at him. The lead administrator, a being covered in metallic feathers, spoke coldly. Student Daewon, you are not authorized to be here. This is a crisis situation. I know, Daewon said. That is why I am here. You have decided that rescue is impossible. I think you are wrong. Every expert has reviewed the situation, another administrator said. The consensus is clear. A rescue mission would fail. Your experts are thinking like aliens who grew up on safe planets, Daewon said. Let me think like a human who grew up on a dangerous one. He pulled up the mission data on the main display. You are planning to send a large, heavily equipped rescue team. That will take too long to organize. By the time they arrive, everyone will be dead. Instead, send a small, fast team. Minimal equipment. Drop in quick, locate survivors, establish a defensive position, and hold until the main rescue arrives. The administrators looked at him like he was insane. That plan has too many variables, one said. Too many points of failure. The alternative is certain death for 30 people, Daewon said. My plan might fail, but it might succeed. Which option serves those people better? Before anyone could respond, Instructor Velmora entered the command center. She had heard about the crisis and came immediately. She looked at Daewon, then at the administrators. He is correct, Velmora said quietly. We are abandoning them because we are afraid. The human offers us courage when we need it most. The lead administrator shook his feathered head. Even if we approved this insane plan, who would go? No rational being would volunteer for such a mission. I volunteer, Daewon said. I volunteer, said a voice from the doorway. It was Jiwoo. The timid Velthir who had once been terrified of humans now stood tall. The human saved my friend during the Abyss trial. I will help him save these people. I volunteer, Hyojin said, stepping forward. The careful Crithian who had always followed every rule. It is time I took a risk for something that matters. 3 other students came forward. Species who had been inspired by Daewon's example over the past months. They were still afraid. But they were willing to act despite their fear. "I will coordinate from orbit," Velmora said. "Someone needs to guide them and manage communications. I volunteer for that role." The administrators looked at each other with expressions of disbelief. Finally, one spoke. "We need authorization from the Galactic Council. This is highly irregular." Ambassador Bora arrived moments later, already informed of the situation. She had authorized the mission before even entering the room. "You have approval from Earth's representative. If others wish to participate, that is their choice." Bora knew she was probably ending her diplomatic career. But she also knew this was bigger than politics. This was about showing the galaxy what was possible when you stopped being paralyzed by fear. The rescue team launched within 2 hours. A small ship, minimal supplies, maximum speed. As they traveled, Daewon explained his plan. It was not complicated. Locate survivors, assess their condition, create a safe perimeter, and defend it until help arrived. "What if the wildlife is too aggressive?" one team member asked. "Then we drive them off or avoid them," Daewon said. "On Earth, humans survived alongside creatures much more dangerous than us. We learned how to be clever instead of strong." They reached the planet and descended through the toxic atmosphere. The ship rattled and shook. Everyone gripped their seats tightly. This was the kind of approach that safety protocols would never allow. It was dangerous and uncomfortable. It worked. They landed near the crash site and quickly located the survivors. 18 were still alive, huddled in the wreckage of their ship. They were injured, scared, and running out of breathable air. When they saw the rescue team, many began crying. Daewon immediately began organizing. "Jiwoo, help me set up a perimeter." Hyojin assessed the injured. "Everyone else, gather materials to fortify this position. We need to hold for 70 hours. The next 3 days were brutal. The planet's wildlife attacked multiple times. The team fought them off using human tactics. Traps, diversions, coordinated defense, techniques that none of the alien species had ever considered. Jiwoo discovered courage he never knew he possessed. When a massive predator broke through their perimeter, the Velthier stood his ground and drove it back with makeshift weapons. Hyojin worked tirelessly to care for the injured, pushing past her natural caution to make quick medical decisions. Each team member contributed their unique abilities, guided by human principles. Take calculated risks, adapt to changing situations, never give up no matter how hard things get. From orbit, Velmora coordinated their efforts and provided guidance. She also watched something remarkable happen. These different species working together using human methods were accomplishing what every expert said was impossible. The official rescue fleet arrived exactly on schedule. They found all 18 survivors alive, protected by the exhausted rescue team. The fleet commander stood in the fortified camp and looked around in amazement. "This should not have been possible," he said. "It was not supposed to be," Daewon replied. "But we did it anyway." The rescue became galactic news within hours. The galaxy that had written off 30 lives watched in shock as every single one returned safely. The small team that everyone said would fail had succeeded beyond all expectations. The event forced a galaxy-wide conversation. How had their civilization become so afraid of risk that they were willing to abandon people in danger? When had safety become more important than courage? The Galactic Academy began a complete restructuring of its curriculum. They created new courses on adaptive problem-solving, risk assessment, and emergency response, all based on human methodologies but adapted for different species. 1 year later, Daewon stood before a classroom of new students. He had graduated at the top of his class, but instead of leaving, he had accepted a position as assistant instructor. He was going to help train the next generation. The classroom was filled with students from 20 different species. Among them were 15 more humans who had joined the academy. Earth was no longer sending just one representative. They were contributing to galactic education in meaningful ways. A young Velthier raised a trembling appendage. "Instructor Daewon, I have heard that the advanced survival course is very dangerous. Is that true?" Daewon smiled. He recognized the fear in the student's voice. It was the same fear Jiwoo had shown when they first met. The same fear that had once paralyzed an entire galaxy. "That depends," Daewon said. "Are you asking for permission to quit before you even try? Or are you asking for encouragement to face your fear?" The student thought for a moment. Daewon could see the internal struggle. The old instinct to retreat versus the new understanding that growth requires risk. Finally, the Velthier straightened up. "Encouragement, instructor. I want to try." Daewon felt pride swell in his chest. This was why he had come to the academy. Not just to learn, but to teach. Not just to explore, but to inspire. Then you are already brave enough, Daewon said. Being brave does not mean you have no fear. It means you act despite the fear. It means you ask questions instead of accepting limitations. It means you remember that danger is relative. He looked at all the students in the classroom. The galaxy spent millions of years trying to eliminate all danger. In doing so, they eliminated growth. They forgot that every species that ever achieved greatness did so by facing challenges, not hiding from them. Humans are not special because we are fearless, Daewon continued. We are special because we learn to ask the right question. When someone tells us something is too dangerous, we ask, for who? That question changed everything for me, Daewon said. And it can change everything for you. You do not have to accept other people's limitations. You can assess risks for yourself and make your own decisions about what you can handle. The students listened carefully. Some still looked nervous, but there was something new in their expressions. Hope, curiosity, the beginning of courage. After class, Jiwoo found Daewon in the corridor. The Velthir was now studying to become an instructor himself. You gave a good speech, he said. I just told them the truth, Daewon replied. The truth that you taught me, Jiwoo said. When we first met, I was afraid of everything. Afraid of you, afraid of failure, afraid of the unknown. You showed me that fear is not a prison. It is information. And what I do with that information is my choice, Daewon smiled. You learned that all by yourself. I just gave you permission to try. They walked together through the academy corridors. The station looked the same as when Daewon first arrived. But everything was different. Students moved with more confidence. Instructors encouraged risk-taking alongside caution. The culture was changing, slowly but surely. That night, Daewon stood at the same window where he had first seen the academy. The neutron star still glowed brilliantly, and the station still floated in space like a diamond. But now it meant something different to him. It was no longer a place that feared danger. It was a place that respected both caution and courage. A place where different species could learn from each other. A place where asking the right question could change everything. For who is this too dangerous? It was a simple question, but it had started a revolution, and Daewon knew this was only the beginning.